First off, I want to thank the grace of heaven and the virtues of the masters, the mercy of the grand predecessor, predecessors, transmitting masters, and everyone here to have this opportunity to talk about this topic, precepts and disciplines. So this is obviously this is one of the ways that we cultivate. So that's what precepts and then disciplines. All right, so let's see. Okay. Again, I keep showing this so everyone should know that the root of suffering is attachment, right? Or attachment desires. Okay, so how do we get rid of these? We need to, that's where the cultivation comes in. This is okay. So yeah, I mean, in the past classes, I haven't really talked too much about cultivating, but we talk about a lot about what's the problem here. The root is the suffering, this attachment and desires, and so. Today we'll talk a little bit about how we try to get rid of the attachments. I mean, and desires. Okay, so basically precepts. Why do we have precepts? Precepts are kind of like, you can say, prohibitions. These are the things we can't do. So in Buddhism. Well, yeah, I guess, maybe not just in Buddhism, but they're generally meant to help us to cut off our greed and attachments, okay, and you could say maybe desires, okay, through physical and mental detachment and discipline. So, so there's the physical aspect and the mental aspect. Basically, physical, being, not things that we should not do, right? Or come into contact with. That's generally the case. Actually, okay, so precepts are, one of the three basic practices of cultivation to overcome the three poisons. Now, three poisons you should all know, right? That's the greed, and anger, or anger, hatred, whatever. And then also, you could say delusion, attachment, ignorance. But ignorance is probably a little bit too general, but we can say delusion. Okay, so these three poisons are, it's critical that we get rid of these. Precepts, precepts are very basic in the sense that they are like laws, right? Like we have laws in society. They say, okay, well, these you can't do these things, right? It's illegal to do these things, certain things. And so this is very similar to that, but applied in, you can say, a moral sense. You can say these are like moral laws, okay, these precepts. And so they apply to, they apply definitely to cultivators, okay? So people who are cultivating, and really they should apply in general to people in general, but anyways, definitely for people who cultivate. Now, why? When Buddha actually started teaching his Dharma, at first he wasn't talking about precepts. He's talking about certain concepts about like the 12 links of dependent origination, cause and effect, causality, that kind of thing. And then some other kind of concepts which were kind of high level, you can say, or difficult. They were difficult to understand, anyways. So actually, a lot of his followers didn't understand or couldn't understand what he was talking about, what he was trying to teach them. And even the devas, right? Devas are the spiritual. You can say they're in the spiritual, the celestial heaven, the spiritual realm. And also even some bodhisattvas, had trouble understanding what he was talking about initially. So Buddha decided to start from the basics, basically this precepts which pretty much everyone can understand, and they can follow, they can practice it, right? So this is it's basically, it's not that precepts and the other conceptual type of teachings. These are all what we call expedient methods or expedient teachings. In other words, we can't say that one is more right than the other, or is it's basically whoever it's suited for, it's best suited for. That is, so precepts are suited for most people because most people, they can understand it. It's very basic level, and so most people they can accept it and they can just practice it, follow it. Okay, so without any problems. But when you try to get into the more theory and other principles, things like concepts, maybe it's harder for a lot of people to understand. But that doesn't mean that those who don't understand those cannot, achieve, enlightenment in the end. It's just that. So these are different methods, if you will, different ways to teach people. And so obviously Buddha, has infinite wisdom. So Buddha can come up with these different expedient teachings. Now, because also because human nature, you can say humans, they've been lost. You can say they've been, in Buddhist terms, they say, people have been lost in this world, lost in this, in this cycle of life and death, reincarnation. And we've been so accustomed to doing what we're not supposed to do, actually, because we think that it's normal, it's fine to do these things, but we're you can say we're ignorant. Okay, we're delusional. So that's why we have to have laws, right, to guide people. Say, or at least to remind us that, hey, wait, this is something I can't do. It's not supposed to do. Right. So basically, that's why laws and precepts, they exist. I'm kind of reminded of this book that I read in, I don't know, I think it was junior high or high school. Junior high, I think it was, and it was a required reading in an English class, actually. It's a book by William Golding. It's called Lord of the Flies. Okay, so but basically, it's actually has interesting. It talks about psychology, but. It's these kids who are on a plane, they crashed on this remote desert place, and there are no adults, so the kids are there. Now, initially things are fine, but then gradually it descended into basically, I don't know, I won't say chaos, but then you had people, the kids actually, they were starting to do things they shouldn't do. They start killing, they competing and killing, or even trying to kill the others, whatever. So basically, even though we may be innocent initially, but it's very easy to fall into or become defiled, become corrupted by our environment. If we don't know what to what is the truth, if we don't know what we should follow, if we're just following our senses, then of course that's what's going to happen. Okay, so basically that's why there are Buddhas who come to this world to try to guide us in the right direction, because otherwise without them, without their teachings, we really are lost, and we wouldn't really find our way to enlightenment. Okay, to get out of this constant cycle of suffering, right? So, okay. Let's see. All right, so again, the three poisons. Well, this is I used this slide last time, but it's not. So we have the the enemy that's inside. Okay, that we have to deal with, and that's what all the precepts, all the practices are about, is really overcoming that internal the demon, if you will, inside. Okay, so So why do we have to? So basically, we have three poisons. Okay, the three poisons are the root of evil, basically, and the cause of reincarnation and suffering in hell. Right? I mean, in Buddha's, they say that the three poisons is the root of hell. I mean, so if we can't get rid of the three poisons, we'll end up going into the underworld, into hell. Okay, to suffer. Okay, or at least definitely, go into reincarnation. But okay, so that's why it's imperative that we try to get rid of all. We have to get rid of all three. Okay, now because all right, let's see. Oh, okay, so we have greed, right? Greed is basically desire and attachments. I mean, basically wanting wanting things and becoming and if you go to more extreme, become more obsessed with things. Okay, and then you have anger, hatred, which is kind of a type of aversion to things that you want it because something that you don't like, and then it makes you angry. Okay, delusion again. So that's the you can say also ignorance or attachment. Basically, also having a false view of the self. So last week, we talked about that we are our ego, or maybe it's 2 weeks ago, but our ego is a false. We have this false view of ourselves, of who we really are. Okay. Now, so how do we get rid of these? There's an antidote to these poisons, and the antidote, well, for the first one, for all of these, first for greed is precepts or discipline, basically. Now, it's not just. I mean, greed is sounds kind of like a narrow term, but it can apply to anything. It's not like just greedy for it's just wanting more of whatever. Or just actually having that strong desire for something. And then so having precepts and discipline to ward this can kind of ward off these bodily evils. Okay, and then the second the antidote to anger is concentration, or they sometimes meditation. Basically, we have to calm the mental disturbances, okay, in our mind. So we, make sure that our mind is composed and not doesn't easily get disturbed by things. Okay, and then the last one is wisdom. Okay, that overcomes the delusion. So that's something that. So now wisdom, it's not something we already have. It actually we have wisdom, but we kind of need to kind of access it or develop it, if you will, to bring it out. Okay, through these various practices and cultivation. Okay, but we're talking about here precepts, so dealing mostly with the greed aspect, right? So now precepts, again, when they're given, there's usually it's just, okay, don't do this, don't do that. And sometimes it's the other way around. It's positive. It's say, do this, okay, do something else, okay. But basically, we want to follow or practice the precepts, but not just to avoid, doing whatever that it says not to do, but we also have to so that's the action part, the bodily action part. But the other aspect is also in our mind, that we should not be having these desires in the first place, right? Okay, so it's just two aspects. You can say the external and then the internal. And we should also understand the rationale behind these precepts too, right? Because, sometimes, I mean, if we let's say we believe in Buddha's teachings, then obviously we will follow we can follow the precepts without any question. But if we're not so sure sometimes, we don't like being told what to do, right, or what not to do. So it's important that we kind of understand, why there are these precepts. Then once, for some people, once they understand, they know the reason, the rationale, then they'll more willingly and maybe more sincerely, practice it. Okay. But it doesn't mean that we should follow the precepts only when we can fully understand them. Again, so because sometimes sometimes practicing, cultivating will also help us to understand. All right, so that's because you you hear people sometimes they come in us and you tell them about the Tao and they say, oh yeah, I want to try to understand it, learn a little bit more before I receive the Tao, and so unfortunately you can't always get to that point where you fully understand things and then you say, okay, I can accept it, I'll do it. So that's so we have to be careful that we don't fall into that. Okay, so again okay, so let's see, what's that? All right. Okay, so why do we have these precepts? Okay, so 5 skandhas, again, I keep bringing this up because it's very important that we understand, because this is really the cause of our delusion. Okay, all right. So, and it is if we truly understand this, how we can address the problem. Okay, so here, let's see. Right. So because we have this diluted view of reality, right? So we want to get to the root of the problem, right? So that's where we have to start from here, looking at the 5 skandhas. Now, let's see. Previously, right, we talked about we kind of cut off. We can kind of address the problem at the level of perception, right? So form, again, just to review. Form refers to, you can say refers to the body, refers to our sense organs, refers to objects, okay? And then so that's the form aspect, and it could be also referred to the external. The sensation is the contact between the forms and us, or you can say our body, or our body, you can say, right? And then, so that's the very low level sensation. We sense something, okay? And then perception is where we start to distinguish what that is, what that sense is, what we are sensing. Okay, so this is where we also have that, where we can have that duality mindset of, like and dislike. Okay, so that's where that comes in, and that's why that's the point. Normally we talk about in cultivation is, I say flip the switch in the mind. So change our perception of things, of what we're sensing, if we can, in order to kind of overcome whatever the problem we have. Okay, so basically we try to cut it off in our mind. So that's the internal aspect. Okay, so all right. But the problem is, not this requires quite a bit of you can say willpower, mental willpower, to be able to say, okay, I know I shouldn't view this as like and dislike and whatever, and but I think most people are probably not at that level where they can just do that. And so this mental discipline, so most people don't have that mental discipline and willpower, right? So that's why. Let's see. Right. So when we are still exposed to the things that maybe we shouldn't be exposed to, so we're still getting this input, right, through our sensations, and so that can affect us. Right, that affects us, and if our mind is not trained right properly, we don't have enough concentration, all that kind of stuff, that we will definitely be, you can say, be tempted. Okay, be tempted. Let's say, depending on the sensation, we say, oh, I like this sensation, so I want more. Or I don't like this, aversion to something, and you try to avoid that. So these are the things that we're dealing with. Now, so there's another aspect that we need, which is we try to also cut off the sensation aspect. Okay, so basically here, so cut off from getting sensation. So now the way I view it is like our cultivation today is a little bit different than it was in the past, or for those who were like monks, for example, in the past, because they were kind of cut off. They separate themselves from society for the most part, and contact with most people, and so they're already kind of cutting off some of this stuff, and that's good, so you don't have to deal with those things, but then trying to cultivate just the mind itself is a little bit, can be difficult, right? But at the same time, for us, it can help us in terms of cutting off the exposure to things that we shouldn't do. Okay, now so it's like I would say this is similar to these two aspects, or these two levels here. It's kind of like when we're getting started, right? Like, let's say we ride a bicycle. We're getting started. We need to have training wheels on the bicycle. Otherwise, most of us, I'm sure we're going to fall over at the very beginning. Every time we just fall over, we can't get very far until we get the hang of it. But until we get the hang of it, then we need those training wheels. So from, what my view, I would say that the cutting off at the sensation level, so in other words, not being exposed to certain things, is like having those training wheels until we can kind of develop our mental discipline to the point where we don't need those training wheels anymore. And so that basically is, that's the goal, of course. And so and those precepts kind of work at, I would say that they work at that level, that cutting off from the body, the external aspect. Okay, so the external. Now, eventually, if we get to the point where, we mentally we have the right discipline, we have the will to be able to just overcome whatever the sensation is, and it doesn't affect us, right? That's basically, at that point, we've internalized the precepts. We've internalized the precepts such that it's no longer this external law or external basically like laws that tell us, oh, you can't do this. Basically, once it's internalized, then naturally we know not to do it. We don't need these precepts or laws to tell us, no, don't do that. Okay, so that's what I mean by internalizing. And okay, so let's see. All right. Okay. All right. So then at that point, we don't depend or rely on these external precepts. So basically, they're a part of us now, right? So there's no longer. It doesn't mean that we it doesn't mean. I mean, obviously, it doesn't mean that we don't practice the precepts anymore. We are. It's just that it's internal now. Okay. All right. So okay. So then. Right. So that's the same. The the example or analogy that I was using, I don't know, maybe in a previous class, about, because the precept is a type of, is a dharma, it's a method. We use it as needed, and then once we're past that, so we get to the next level, then we don't need those external the dharmas anymore. Okay, so it's like when you cross the lake with the boat, right? So let's say the precepts is like the boat. You use the boat to get across the lake. Once you're across the lake, then you don't need the boat anymore. So you don't need those precepts, at least not the external precept. Okay, so now they're internalized. Once they're internalized, then we can go on our way. And if we encounter another lake, we can still cross it without the external boat anymore, because we already know it's already internalized. We already know how to do it. Okay, and we will automatically, pretty much, at that point, be able to do it. All right. So okay. So that's our goal, is try to basically everything, all the dharmas, all the we want to try to internalize it such that it's a part of us. It is us. Okay, it's automatic. Okay, all right, because ultimately we have to let go of all attachments, including attachments to the dharma. Right. Okay. So interestingly enough, in Confucius, in the Great Learning, right, he also mentions basically the way to achieve world harmony is basically through these 8 steps. He gave these 8 steps here, right? So the first step is basically to get rid of attachments. Okay, get rid of attachments, and you can say get rid of desires that lead to attachments, things like that. And so this is similar to basically, Confucius didn't really say specifically what the precepts are. He kind of talked more in general, but things like, you can say like the four monkeys, the 4 don't. No evils, right? See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, and do no evil, right? So basically, that's what this is talking about here, right? Yeah. Okay, so and then the second step is to realize the truth. Basically, which is kind of what I was saying, is to internalize these, because we have a conscience. We all have a conscience, and the conscience knows can do the right thing. Okay, so once we've, you can say, I guess we have a conscience, but maybe it's not as developed. It basically, so we need to kind of, through these practices, to develop that conscience, make sure that conscience can overcome or override our ego, okay, our desires. So we follow the conscience. So we realize the truth, realize our conscience, okay, and then we will be able to, we follow that, and yeah. So and then the next one is also to be sincere, to have sincere intent. So this so these are actually similar to the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Paths, or part of those, and so the sincerity, basically, if we can be sincere about doing this, then we can most likely be able to succeed. And then also we need to rectify our mind, having proper thoughts, proper intentions, mindfulness, all that. So when our thoughts are sincere, then our mind will be proper. Once our mind is proper, then everything we do will agree with the true principles and with our conscience. Okay, and then to cultivate the body, or rectify the body, our conducts and speech. Basically, once our mind is clear, it's proper, then our actions will also be proper. Okay. Okay. So, and then you can say the last three are kind of the results. I would say basically of that. So basically, once we can cultivate the self ourselves, get to a certain level of cultivation that we can start in the family, because that's the smallest unit, social unit, if you will, that we can start in the family to achieve order and harmony in the family. Okay, so those who are closest to us, who are and then from there, then we can achieve order in the state or the nation. Okay, so because the state or nation is composed of families. Okay, so once basically, if everyone in every family is in harmony and peaceful, then the whole nation will also be the same. And then if the whole nation can be, then you can achieve finally world harmony. So this is assuming that everyone everywhere is following this, practicing, cultivating, right, to achieve this. I mean that's a tall order today, but but that's the ideal. Okay, that was Confucius' his ideal for achieving world harmony. But it does start with the individual. Okay, so and we have to start by getting rid of those attachments, desires, cut them off. So that's similar to talking about the precepts, right? So I wanted to mention is, I mean, basically in all the previous classes, I tried to show that it's not just Buddha talking about this stuff. It's Confucius, Lao Tzu, Jesus. They're all talking about the same things, right? Okay. So, right. So now, today mainly we're going to talk about these 5 basic precepts. The precepts of the body, which are no killing, right? No stealing, no sexual misconduct. Precepts of speech, no. Basically, most of them, they say no lying. Okay, so but I think lying is a bit very narrow, and so I just say untruthful speech, or you can say false speech, and then precepts of the mind, basically no intoxicants. Okay, so we'll talk about each one of these individually. So basically, in other religious teachings or traditions, for example, in Christianity, they also have precepts like the Ten Commandments, right? And in fact, in the Ten Commandments, they actually include the first 4 of these are in the Ten Commandments. Okay, and then the last one, they don't have that one. They don't have that one really specifically on the last one in their Ten Commandments, right? So basic precepts, basically, they look somewhat specific, right? You say, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. Like sexual misconduct also is kind of relatively specific, but it's actually, it goes beyond that, just sexual misconduct. It's basically the sensual desires. Okay, let me see. Oh, and also basically, so these kind of like are part of what's called the 10 wholesome deeds, or 10 wholesome acts or actions. Okay, and let's see. Yeah, okay. That I'll talk about that next. But so. Okay, so these 5 precepts here don't necessarily cover all the things that maybe we shouldn't do, okay? But these are kind of the major ones, if you will. So this is probably, I don't know, maybe, but at least these are the ones that come from basically our baser instinct, or our animal instincts or nature, okay? So those are. So these are kind of the more important. You can say the more important ones or severe ones that need to be dealt with, right? Okay, so in the 10 wholesome deeds, then again, this is similar or an expansion of the 5 precepts, which is the deeds of the body. Again, abandon killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, or really, sensual desires. Okay, so you have those 3 deeds of the speech. So here, where besides the untruthful speech, you also have these other ones: slander or divisive speech, harsh or abusive speech, gossip or unrealistic, what I call unrealistic, unrealistic or crazy nonsense speech, okay? And then deeds of the mind. So abandon to envy or jealousy, ill will, okay, and false views. Now, this doesn't look like it's a direct, if you look at it, it says no intoxicants on the 5 precepts. And here in the 10 wholesome deeds, talks about these other things. Actually, it's related to the no intoxicants, because when you take intoxicants, then any of these are possible. So you can say, these are related to those, right? Okay. All right. So here's a question. What is the basis of the 5 precepts, right? So it's not like someone or Buddha just came up with, says, oh, okay, hey, one day he just said, all right, these are 5 things that you can't do, okay? There's a reason, okay? So, so basically, what is that reason? Where did this come from, right? All right, and I don't know if anyone knows, but okay, so actually, if you look at what Confucius talks about, the 5 constants, they map directly to these. Okay, so basically, they come from this. So this is the internal side. They come from the inside, the internal. So obviously, because Confucius talks about benevolence, righteousness, propriety, faith, sincerity, trust, okay, and wisdom. Well, actually, okay, the order is actually these last 2 are flipped. But so if you have benevolence, you would not kill. Right? If you have righteousness, you would not steal. If you have propriety, you would not, have sexual misconduct. If you have basically sincerity, okay, let's say sincerity, you would not say things that are not true. And if you have wisdom, you would not, lose your mind or lose control of yourself through intoxicants. Okay, so there's a direct mapping. So that's really the reason why. So Buddha never talked about the ones on the 5 constants, but he talks about it in this way because this is what most people can understand. So in this sense, it's kind of interesting that Confucius is more talking about the principle, whereas Buddha here, in terms of the precepts, is talking about something that's a little bit more tangible, more concrete, an application of these. Okay, so so this is kind of the internal, and so this is something that we need to understand, because if we just rely on external precepts to tell us, oh, no killing, but if I don't understand why, then maybe I one day I'll decide, why should I practice this precept? Okay, so but once we understand where it's coming from, it's internal. This is actually, it's innate. It's we have these innate quality, or I guess we could say qualities or characteristics that lead directly to those precepts. Okay. Right. Okay, so now let's get directly into each of these. So no killing. No killing. Now, in the 10 Commandments, so in the Bible, right, Old Testament Bible, there's basically one of the 10 Commandments says to do not kill. Actually, I've seen it written as do not murder as well. Now, unfortunately, when you say killing and murdering are slightly different. Murder is a little bit more narrow in scope, and it sounds like it's there's intention, right, and also sounds like it's basically dealing with people, humans. Okay, so unfortunately, in the Ten Commandments, the no killing is it's basically always interpreted to mean do not kill humans. Okay, do not murder humans. All right. Now, this is definitely a human-centric interpretation of this commandment, right? God did not qualify this no killing as saying who cannot be killed, right? So this is actually human intention rather than God's will. And I don't know why they still interpret it that way, but that's I guess they can't accept. They probably can't accept the fact that hey, you're not supposed to kill animals either. So, but that's why we have to be careful not to use our own biased interpretation as the true meaning of the words. And the ultimate way to get to do that, right, is to get rid of our biases. Okay, so that's very important, getting rid of biases. All right, so anyways, no killing is basically we have to have respect for all life, right? And this is, again, manifesting the five constant, the benevolence. All right, so now all life means really sentient life, sentient beings, which include humans and animals. All right, so these are, so that's basically, let's see, yeah. So now you might say, well, some people say, well, what about animal life? I mean, Buddha specifically talks about sentient life, okay? Now, plant life, sorry, I meant plant life. Plant life, basically, they are not sentient, right? They don't have let's say, a nervous system, so they don't feel the way humans or even animals feel. Okay, if they feel at all, I mean, they basically they can react in a biological way to the environment, but they cannot sense. They don't have a consciousness. Okay, but obviously, killing. I mean, you can say, oh, I kill a plant, but actually, plants are a little bit different because yes, you can chop down, cut. Plants, but they'll grow back, or so it's a little bit different. If you cut off an arm or whatever, that's not going to grow back. So there are differences. But anyway, so we're talking about just sentient beings here. All right, now basically, I would say not just it shouldn't be. It's not just narrowly defined as no killing, but also harming. Sentient beings. So basically, we should do not harm or kill, or cause to harm or kill. Basically, so that's either directly or indirectly, right? The direct is we do it ourselves. Indirect if someone else does it for us. Okay. So, but the result is the same. So therefore, and we all have guilt. Okay. So whether I do it myself or I involve someone else to do it. If I involve someone else to do it, we both have guilt. All right, so that's something. So we should avoid doing, having other people do our dirty work for us, basically. All right, if we're not going to do it, then we shouldn't ask someone else to do it. So what this really means is you got to stop eating or using animal products. Okay, so ideally become vegan or at least vegetarian. Okay, so vegan means, not even using any kind of no dairy, right? Milk, no eggs, right? Vegetarian can probably include those. So this is, if you most people will probably say, hey, well, I don't kill the animals myself. But again, it's indirect killing, and there is this chain of guilt that leads to us, right, by consuming the meat, right? So that's one thing. Obviously, we don't kill people. That's should be pretty obvious. And then there's also the Let me see. Oh, it's not good. Oh, okay. Uh, this killing of, like rodents, insects. Okay, those things, those are kind of harder. Now, because we think that, oh, these are pests and whatnot, and we don't vermin. We don't want these. And we want to try to get rid of them. We should do our best not to kill them. Okay, so I mean, we tried to trap them, and then, put them off, free them somewhere else. Ideally, maybe it's not always possible. Like sometimes in the past, I've had to use, bait for cockroaches, right? Because there were just too many, and but once they've decreased in numbers, I would try to catch them and throw them outside. Okay, so we try to do these as much as possible, and so let's see. Then there's a question of accidental killing, right? So obviously, we should not have premeditated or willingly, intentionally try to kill things. Now, what about accidental killing? Well, accidental killing or unintentional killing, basically, there is still karma. Okay, so basically, the killing, right? Whether we have intention or not, there is still karma. Now, if there's intention, then it may be a little bit more severe, but still we try to avoid the accidental killing as well. All right. Now, okay, so now there are other, other types of situations involved in killing. Let's say, what about war? Okay, so let's say, you're a soldier and do you kill? Right? There's also these it kind of get tricky, but still, that's why they have the conscientious objectors, right? So you can say, I object to killing, and so I don't want to. I mean, this is in the case of like when they have a draft, military draft, that you can say you can avoid, being sent off to kill people. But even if you're a soldier, there is karma again, whether it's intentionally killing or not. Of course, there's also self-defense. If you're sent to war somewhere, and it depends on what the cause is. Okay, so that can be a factor. Or if you're defending your country, then yes, then that you can say it's a righteous cause. And if you have to kill others when they are invading your country, then you do what you have to do. But still, there is this karma, and then there's also collective karma for the whole nation as a whole because of this whole war thing. But karma, okay, that's a different another story to talk about. But there's also suicide. Okay, again, no killing also applies to suicide. Because you're not taking another life, but you're taking your own life, and so that means there's no respect for our own life. But we should respect all life, including our own. So suicide is not allowed; it's prohibited. Okay, so you can't do that. Euthanasia, which is a mercy killing, right? Or something like this mercy killing again is the same thing. You think maybe you're doing the person something, helping them out, but this is, again, you're kind of interfering with karma, if you will, and then also, whether, ending life support, like the DNR, do not resuscitate type of thing, but usually that's okay because that's basically, there's if there's no hope for survival, even if they're on life support, then that's a different story. Okay, capital punishment. Okay, so this is one of the things that basically the death penalty. That's again not really. I mean, it's a severe punishment, and it's more. But it's not respecting the sanctity of life. Okay. abortion. This is kind of a controversial subject, but most, if not all, religions forbid abortion. Okay, on the assumption that the fetus has a soul. Okay, so even before it's born. Now, yeah, I mean, there is, from the Buddhist or Taoist view, there is, basically the soul. There's like two aspects, right? The Hun and Pa. Okay, so I think they're called the animus and the anima. Okay, so, but yeah, basically part of the soul is already in the body, is in the fetus before it's born. And so, but once the baby is born and takes his first breath, then the final part comes in to the baby. So, but abortion again is you're dealing. I mean, this also gets into other. Why do you need to do an abortion? Things like that. Gets into other issues, but generally should not have abortion, right? Okay. Now, as relating to the Noble Eightfold Paths, right? No killing. That's first in the proper views and intentions, proper intentions, right? There's understanding karma. Be kind, and we have to be kind and merciful, right? Let go of our desires, attachments to taste. In this case, right? Proper conduct and livelihood. Again, those directly deal with the no killing aspect. Livelihood, right? Basically, if you have a job that does killing, slaughterhouse, right? Then that's something to be avoided. Then you can't really, you can't practice these precepts if that's what you do. If you work in a slaughterhouse. Okay, so proper efforts. Okay, so this applies to all the precepts. Okay, so basically we want to stop killing and prevent further killing. Do not encourage or praise any killing. Okay, so this is also part of like the mindfulnesses, but the maintain and promote abstinence from killing and do not give rise to thoughts and desires of killing. So again, there's the mental aspect of making sure that in our mind, even though I'm not killing, but in my mind I'm thinking of killing. Okay, so for example, if we are vegetarian or vegan, but in my mind I still think about having that desire to eat the animal, eat the flesh, then that's killing. Okay, that's considered killing, even though you didn't kill anything, but it's in your mind. Okay, so that's already you've broken the precept, right? So that's something that we have to always keep in mind. There is this mental aspect that we have to be careful of. So it's not just our physical actions, but what's in our mind. We have to control that. Make sure we don't have fall into these. Okay, break the precepts. All right. All right. And the next one. No stealing. Okay, so in the Ten Commandments, the same thing. They have say no stealing. Basically, respect for others' properties. Manifest righteousness, right? So we know what's right and wrong. That's this is someone else's property that we shouldn't take that, and it doesn't belong to me. Okay. Now again, we don't want to steal or cause to steal. So again, direct and indirect. You can't like hire someone else to steal for you. So that's the same thing. Okay, that's stealing. Yeah. All right. And then. Okay, so there could be what we call accidental and unintentional stealing. Now, this is something that maybe we do that we don't realize. So, for example, when we're at work, we take some supplies home with us to use. Now, if the employer says, you can work from home, and then so you can borrow these or use certain supplies at home, then that's fine. But if the employer doesn't say that, and we just take things, take these pens, take the paper, take notepads, whatever, home with us, and use them at home, unless they were, given to us to use, that's really would be considered stealing. Or stealing time. Okay, so we're on our work hours and we start doing personal stuff during those work hours, or or using whatever, using the computers or using whatever for personal things during work hours. So that's actually technically also stealing from the employer. Also in the temple, the same thing applies in the temple. If we come to the temple and there's stuff lying around, food, fruits, whatever, books, we decide to just take them. Because we think that maybe they're offered for people to take, and we have to ask permission. Okay, so those are things that we have to be careful of, that we aren't basically committing, sins, I guess you can say, these little sins of stealing without really knowing it, okay, or without really realizing it. Now, sometimes we might say, I'll take something because I feel entitled to it. Whether it's working, I'll say, hey, I'm working, and but I feel like my employer isn't paying me enough, and so I supplement it by taking some stuff. Or like I'm in temple, hey, I pay my dues, I pay my temple host fees, and so I should be entitled to take some fruits or whatever, or food, things like that. That's wrong view. Okay, so that's the wrong thinking. So we can't do that. So that's no matter how we think we're justified, that's stealing. Okay, so we have to get permission first. Right. Again, the Noble Eightfold Path. It's we have to understand that there's karma again. Let go of the material desires and attachments. Okay, so that's in the proper view and proper intentions. We tried to do that. So if we can let go of these material desires and attachments, then we won't, feel a need to steal. Proper conduct is one of them says no stealing. Livelihood, again. Livelihood, for example, there are people who are in the business of stealing, basically. Those who scam others, right? Commit fraud. And also, I've seen this, basically, and I've heard, you probably see it in the news every now and then. People who pretend that they have a disability or whatever, and they go out to get donations. And that to me, that's stealing. I mean, that's because you're faking. That's basically defrauding people. Okay, or scamming people. So that's not right either. Okay, and then proper efforts, again, we want to do the same thing to stop the stealing, to prevent further stealing. Okay, do not encourage or praise stealing. So when we see all those people, those protesters, they're looting, and we say, they should do that because that I hate that company, the store that they're looting. So we can't. When we do that, then we're also stealing indirectly. This is kind of a different type of indirect stealing. Okay, so so we have to be careful of that. And maintain, again, to maintain and promote the non-stealing, and then don't give rise to thoughts and desires of stealing, of taking stuff. Okay, so again, the external and the internal aspects. Okay. No sexual misconduct. Okay, so in the Ten Commandments, the Bible, it says they're a little bit more specific. They say no adultery. Okay, so so adultery obviously is a sexual misconduct, but it's only one type of sexual misconduct. So that's so the problem. That's why you got to be careful with these. I don't know how they, how they interpret this in the church, really, if they mean all sorts of sexual misconduct. But if you just follow the words, the letter of the words, literally, then it just says no adultery, and so it wouldn't cover the other types. So that's the problem, and this is also a problem with our laws in general. that they're too specific, and then they leave the door open for other inappropriate conduct. Okay, all right. So respect for our pure nature, that we observe propriety, right? Propriety, and basically, so we don't engage in or cause to engage in, sexual misconduct. Actually, so the sexual, sexual misconduct. So let's see. So it includes adultery, sex for hire, sensual, such. So it's really not just sexual misconduct. It's actually seeking sensual pleasures, if you will. Okay, and then also the other types of things which are also, against the law. Really, the rapes, sexual abuse, molestation, that type of thing. So obviously, now, if we're really like a monk, let's say, if you're cultivating like a monk or a nun, then they actually take this a step further, and they just take a vow of celibacy. Okay, so that cuts off the sexual or sensual pleasures entirely, right? But I think for most lay people, they that's not a requirement, right? Okay. So again, in the Noble Eightfold Paths, right? So you have the proper view and understanding, understanding that there's always karma involved in these acts. We have to let go of the essential desires and attachments. Okay, again, in this proper conducts, again, that's in there. Proper livelihood, again, as long as you're not engaged in the sex trade or trafficking in this kind of stuff, or doing that certain type of sensual type of massage, right? So again, proper efforts to stop and prevent this type of deed. Don't encourage or praise it. We want to maintain and promote abstinence from this, and also don't give rise to thoughts and desires. Okay, so maybe we don't do it, but then in our mind we might might fantasize about, some people might fantasize or think about these things, then that's also already breaking the precept. Okay. All right. So, no untruthful speech. Ten Commandments says, do not bear false witness or testimony against your neighbors. Basically, don't lie. Okay. So that's, again, it's very narrow. Again, the precept, as it's originally worded, is also kind of narrow, says don't lie. But so I say no untruthful speech because it includes other things. So we have to have respect for honesty and sincerity. Manifest our sincerity, right, our trustworthiness, or so that's in the 5 constants. And then, okay, again, don't engage or cause to engage in this type of speech. So it can include lying, slander, or divisive speech, right? So these are kind of listed in the 10 wholesome deeds, okay? So saying bad things about people, or harsh or abusive speech, which, cursing people, things like that. Gossip or unrealistic speech. So gossip, the saying, maybe even, these are basically become like rumors, or unrealistic. What I mean by unrealistic is things like exaggerations, embellishments, wishful thinkings, nonsensical talk. Okay, so all these things kind of fall into that category. And then flattery and idle talk. Okay, so flattery is, you might be saying some nice things to someone, but it's they may not be true actually, and also they're you say them for some there's a motive. Okay, you want to get something out of it. Okay, so that's not being sincere. And then idle talk is, we tend sometimes, shooting the breeze, right? Just talking about any random stuff, or talking too much. So that's, we try to avoid. It doesn't mean that we can't have, just a normal conversation, just talk about the weather, talk about whatever, the news. But there's, we don't want to, I mean, I guess this kind of falls into the nonsense type of talk. that we shouldn't do, right? Okay. All right. So again, this is also in all of the Noble Eightfold Paths, right? You have to understand that things that we say can also create karma, right? So we have to let go of the ego, right? A lot of things that we say is because of our ego, because of our view, our deluded view of ourselves and others. Okay, so yeah, so this is where the proper speech comes in, and then proper livelihood again. Maybe those who maybe lie for a living. I don't know. Sowing discord, things like that. Actually, yeah, today, you hear a lot about fake news and fake these like I don't know they're whether it's on social media, there are a lot of these bots that spew out false news, fake news and things like that, and also spew out things that kind of deliberately cause people to get riled up and have discord among people. So it's very divisive. So that's what we've seen in this country, actually. So that type of if that's your job, if that's the type of thing you do, then that's also falling into this category. And then so again, we want to stop and prevent this, and don't encourage it or praise it. What's going on? Okay, so and then maintain and promote the abstinence from, and then don't give rise to thoughts of, even though I don't say it, I don't say some bad things, but in my mind I'm thinking those bad things of someone, then that's the same thing, really. So we shouldn't. We should be mindful, be aware of that, right? Okay. Intoxicants. In the Ten Commandments, they don't have this. They have something called, they have do not covet or desire your neighbor's wife, house, property. Okay, so this is kind of like, I don't know, that might be kind of like greed or I don't know, desire or envy, jealousy, that type of thing, which can arise from the intoxicants. So, okay, so intoxicants is basically we have to have respect for it. We have to have this clear mind. We want to manifest our wisdom, right? That innate wisdom. If we take intoxicants, that alters our mind, right? Our minds, and we won't have a clear mind. We can't think clearly. That wisdom will definitely not come out. Okay, so all right, so we don't want to take or engage in or cause to take or engage in these intoxicants. Now, so let's so this includes alcohol and then drugs, typically recreational drugs. Okay, so now I say do not take or engage in. So basically, if you don't want to own a liquor store, right, selling alcohol. You don't want to even give someone alcohol, right? Let's say, you're going to a friend's place and they invited you to dinner and you bring a bottle of wine, whatever. Technically, we shouldn't do that, okay? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's okay. So right. So so these intoxicants, they can lead to all the other things that we talked about: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, untruthful speech, false views. Okay, envy, jealousy, ill will. Okay, all of these things that can arise when our mind is basically confused or affected by the alcohol or drugs. All right, so they can cause confusion. It can give us a false sense of escape or joy. So a lot of people, they take alcohol or drugs as an escape from their problems, what they're dealing with. Okay, but that's only temporary, and it's not a real true escape. It doesn't solve the problem. Okay, and furthermore, all this can lead to addiction. And once you're addicted, then you have no control over it. And okay, so that's even worse. Okay, so plus, when we're under the influence, right, besides doing these things, or we might end up like, so there's like the DUI, right, drunk driving, you can kill people, but, if we're in this kind of like la-la land in our mind, then we really can't function in society. So those people who are drug addicts or alcoholics, it's definitely, they can't really function well in society. And so that's, so not, don't even talk about cultivation. That's impossible for them. So, all right. So again, in the Noble Eightfold Path, says we have to understand again, this can lead to karma. We have to let go of attachments, desires. Okay, so everything basically applies in the Noble Eightfold Path to this. And again, we want to not give rise to the thoughts or desires of these things. So those who maybe they were, alcoholics, say, and they're giving it up, but they still think about, I wish I had that drink, and so that's also something that we have to cut out, because that one day, if we're not careful, that will lead to actually action. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So basically, so we need to have that discipline in the mind. So the external aspect of the not doing things that we're not supposed to do. Okay. And then you can say that's kind of like the physical aspect, the external aspect, and then also in the mind, the internal aspect, we have to have that discipline and understanding so that we won't do those things, and we won't even think about them, okay, or won't give rise to desires for those. So Buddha says, a disciplined mind brings happiness. Ultimately, it does, because we won't. Once we have a disciplined mind, we know to cultivate. We won't cause karma. We won't create suffering, right? Okay. Right. I want to also mention, because in the temple, those 5 precepts, they apply to our lives, everyday lives. No matter where we are, right? All the time, they apply. Okay, so it's not just in the temple. So now these here, the 4 proper conducts also applies everywhere, and it's basically the ones that we just talked about. The proper conduct of the body, right, to observe the precepts of the body that we talked about earlier, and that of the speech, okay, and the mind is basically to eliminate the 3 poisons, and in terms of actions, is to observe. Okay, so observe the 3 pillars, the 5 constants, and 8 virtues. So basically, the 3 pillars are the relationships between ruler and subject, husband and wife, and parents and children, because these are kind of like the pillars of society, if you will, the in terms of relationships. Okay, so the 3 core relationships that everyone has, and so maintaining the proper relationships in those 3, and then also the 5 constants, okay, as we talked about earlier: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and then faith, sincerity, or trust. Okay, and also the 8 virtues, which are filial piety, brotherhood, loyalty, trust or trustworthiness, propriety, righteousness, integrity, and sense of shame. Integrity or honesty, okay, and then sense of shame. Okay, so those are, so we have to, in the 4 proper conducts, we make sure that we follow these principles and or practice these or manifest these virtues, right? Okay, so but in the temple, then we have a little bit more specific rules, what we call the 3 distinctions, and this is very important too. There's a distinction between male and female, between the holy and public, or public and mundane and private. Okay, and also in financial matters. Okay, so these 3, right? The observing the distinction or boundary between male and female, right? So the temple is a dignified and pure place of worship and learning and cultivating, right? It's not a place to seek personal relationships or romance or anything like that, right? So you'll see that in the temple that we do separate, right? When we sit separately, male and female, and also in certain rituals that they're performed separately, male and female, and also when we line up, maybe again on opposite sides. Okay, so this is kind of to maintain this propriety of this separation, okay, between the sexes. Actually, this is in some other religions they do this too, like in Islam, right? There's separation, and also in I think in Judaism, I think they do that too, to a certain extent. Okay, so it's not an uncommon thing. Now in the temple, there's generally no physical contact between male and females. Like for example, shaking hands, like that's something that we do a lot in society. So in the temple, or they might do hugging, right? So in the temple, we kind of avoid that if possible, right? And so basically we just like bow to each other. Okay, that's right. And then also when we try to maintain separation when on temple business or conducting Tao affairs. So if we're like we need to go somewhere to propagate the Tao, usually if practical, okay, it may not be practical, but the male and female don't sit together in the car, for example. I mean, they could probably, like in the driver's seat, it's not too much of a problem, but maybe in the back seat if they're sitting next to each other. I mean, but if that's the only if you don't have any option, then that's what you do. The only, I guess, the concern is not to have gossip and rumors flying around. Say, oh, these two, they're together, because they sat together. I mean, that's kind of stupid, but that stuff can happen, right? And so you generally try to avoid this kind of thing. Okay, and then so observe the distinction between what's holy or public and what's mundane or private. Okay, so the temple is not a place to discuss or conduct business or private matters. So this is something that the temple is here for us to worship, to learn, to cultivate, not to conduct business. Okay, that's not the Tao related business. Okay, so and we cannot use the Tao or the temple name, reputation, or assets to conduct business. So I'm going to borrow the name at the temple to conduct my business because the temple has a good reputation, and so it can help my business. So we can't do that either, right? And we can't use the temple as a platform for politics. In other words, so we kind of stay out of politics for the most part. We can't. So I can't like in class we cannot say, oh, hey, this is the candidate we should vote for. We can't. You can't do that. We shouldn't do that. I mean, you're going to do that privately with the individuals outside of the temple. That's fine, but we can't do that inside the temple. Okay, so the temple itself stays out of politics, right? And do not misappropriate temple assets, of course, or funds. So we cannot take things for our own use. Even if we're just borrowing it. If we're borrowing it, we need to ask for permission, okay? And, okay, so we should also, not gossip in the temple, but unfortunately, there's also, people do gossip, things like that, so that's human nature. And then, hopefully, we become more aware of these things and aware of ourselves, that we know to cultivate properly so that we don't, do these things, right? Because these are really, when these three distinctions, these temple rules, basically, breaking these temple rules we're committing sins, and there is going to be there's karmic retributions. So we have to be careful. Now, the third one is to observe the distinction or clarity of financial matters. All right, so obviously the temple, there's, people make donations, and the temple finances and bookkeeping must be clear and transparent, right? So we're not like, cooking the books, doing something, and temple finances cannot be mixed with or used with for personal finances. So, I can't say, oh, I'm just going to borrow, some of this temple money for my use, and I'm going to return it. That's a no-no. Okay, we definitely cannot do that. The money must be wisely spent. Okay, so there's a Buddhist saying that 1 cent of temple money is as big as Mount Sumeru. Okay, that's a sacred mountain in Buddhist tradition, right? So it's really we cannot use our view of, oh, it's only a penny, that's not worth anything. But from the temple or from the Buddhist view, that's worth a whole lot. So we cannot misappropriate or misspend even a penny, right? We should not take advantage of the temple or its assets. Yeah, just because we come here and there's for class, and there's we have you can drink coffee, you can drink. We have meals here. You can eat, get a free meal. Well, we shouldn't take advantage of that. We should definitely, feel, if listen to our conscience. Say, oh, I can make a contribution because someone had to pay for that. All right. So, and temple finances should not be like this hidden secret thing. Okay, so the members should all know, okay, how the money's being spent, where it's going, things like that. Now the other thing is that we should also be careful sometimes of maybe where this money is coming from in terms of donations. In general, we only take donations from Dao members. Usually, we don't get it from outside people. Who are not Dao members, and we should sometimes be careful if, this is probably not a big issue, but it could be. If it's coming from a questionable source, if they're trying to launder money, so it depends on where it's coming from. So we don't want to get involved in that. And also, it's important that we don't solicit donations privately from members or non-members, right? So if there's if we're trying to do a fundraising, let's say we got to build a temple, and we need donations. So yeah, we do that in the open, right? When the temple is in the temple, we do that in the temple. We announce that in the temple. Okay, so but we should not try to privately solicit donations from members, because that can also make people feel kind of get into awkward situations. Okay. All right. So conclusion. All right. So the precepts and disciplines, right? On the external side, they prohibit us from doing things, and basically we can avoid contact certain things, right? Not doing things. On the internal side, right, we have to develop our mental discipline to not do those things, and so that should come naturally. Comes from our, after all, these 5 precepts, they come from the 5 constants, which are qualities of our Buddha nature. Okay, so it should come naturally, right? And then we accept. Okay, so we accept and practice precepts. Then we internalize it by understanding and realizing that the rationale is internal and it's innate, and it's in our conscience. Okay, so and these are the 5 constants, right? The qualities of our true self, our conscience, which is the basis of these 5 precepts, right? And they help us cut off or prevent desires and attachments, right? So the precepts are said to be the antidote to the poison of greed, right? And they also stop us or prevent us from creating karma, right? Like killing, stealing, all these things, they create karma. So that stops creating those karma, and it also stops disturbing our spirit and our mind, so that we can have a more pure spirit and mind, so that we, that can help us mentally with concentration, things like that. To kind of be able to then cultivate to the next higher level, right? And his precepts also help us to realize our conscience, right? Because those 5 constants come from there. Okay, and then the temple rules, maintain dignity, order, and propriety within the temple, and they prevent us from committing offenses or sins that maybe we don't know about. We think, what's normal in society, but in the temple, there are other rules that may be a little bit more restrictive, that we didn't know about. But so that's why it's important that we do know what these rules are, so that we aren't unwittingly committing offenses and sins, and we're getting demerits and all sorts of karma, things like that. So that's basically the basic thing about the precepts and these temple rules. They're there to help us to cultivate, so that we can kind of get to the higher level. This is, again, a very basic way of cultivation, but this is where pretty much everyone starts at this level, because it's hard to kind of go directly into the mind and kind of cultivate in the mind. It's without these other things. All right. So okay. Again, I hope everyone can understand that the precepts and be able to practice them. And so, especially, if you're not vegetarian, the killing is still being done. And so you got to do something about that, and encourage you to try to stop that. And again, so may the Tao be with you. If I had said anything wrong or not satisfactorily, I asked the Buddhas for forgiveness, and also asked transmitters and lecturers for their corrections. Thank you.